What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the reveal of number 4 in my power rankings, a deep dive into the Green Bay Packers. And this is one that a lot of you have been calling for really since the Colts were revealed at 20. Many of you think this team should be ranked in the low teens, and as soon as you found out this was a top 10 team in my rankings, it's been video after video just, oh, you're so high on the Packers, like, how are you doing that? They're nothing without Aaron Rodgers. And I guess that's just recency bias. Like, I don't get it. This is a team that was in the NFC Championship a year ago with a team that was a shell of what this team is on paper. This is a team that was 4-1 last year, was by Vegas' standards the NFC favorite and the most likely team to win the Super Bowl outside of New England, and no one got as high odds as they did until the playoffs started. And this is a team that has gotten rid of a defensive coordinator that frankly should have been fired a long time ago, and added a general manager that isn't afraid to make moves, and he's already made some big moves that we'll talk about. So this is a better team than I think this team has had in a few years. But even if they were the same team, I think it's pretty crazy to say they're not a top 10 team based on everything I just said. And all those comments say, oh, this team is nothing without Aaron Rodgers. They're like a college roster. Well, that's pretty lazy. I mean, this team does have some players. Just because they didn't rally when Rodgers got hurt doesn't mean they don't have anyone. Is it the best roster in the NFL? No. But that's also a stupid argument because, newsflash, number 12 is taking the field for Green Bay in a week. So let's get into the positional breakdown here. So we'll run through the roster, talk about Rodgers and all of the players that apparently some of you don't know exist. Talk about my win expectations for this team. So let's talk about Aaron Rodgers, the best quarterback in the NFL. I don't shy away from calling him the greatest quarterback in the NFL. And let's talk about that for a second. I won't get too far into it. I have a 16-minute video I did a while ago making all of these points in depth. But people say Tom Brady's the GOAT, and that's fine. He's one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks to ever play. He's the most accomplished quarterback to ever do it. He loves the game. He took a discount to play it. He's got everything I love about a football player. I don't hate Tom Brady by any standards. But you ask football people around the league, who's the best quarterback in the league? Oh, it's Aaron Rodgers. Personally, I don't even think it's that close. And everyone likes to bring up the rings. In a sport where 22 players are on the field for every play and a single play can completely change the outcome of a game. I mean, 2015 tells you everything you need to know about what a ring means for how good a quarterback is. Let's just look at Aaron Rodgers versus Tom Brady real quick. Aaron Rodgers goes into Seattle with a bad ankle, 7-point underdogs, does everything he can, virtually wins the game. One player blows his assignment on an onside kick. Seattle takes the lead. Rodgers gets 40 seconds to lead a miraculous field goal drive. He gets it done. They go to overtime. He loses the toss, never sees the football, loses the game. He's going home. He's watching Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. And what does he see? Well, he sees Tom Brady standing on the sideline. Tom Brady's getting ready to tell his kids that there's always next year and that we learn from our losses. And Malcolm Butler makes a crazy play. Many call it the dumbest play call of all time to pass the ball on the 1-yard line. And all of a sudden, Tom Brady's fitting his pointer finger for a ring. Those are just 2 plays in one season. You blow it up over the course of a career. I mean, you're kidding yourself if you think rings tell you how good a quarterback is. And you do realize that defense matters, right? Only 3 teams in the last 21 years have won a Super Bowl without a top 10 scoring defense. That's 3 out of 21. And one was the Ravens team when Ray Lewis missed most of the season and came back in the playoffs. Most people would be pretty dumb to say that wasn't a top 10 defense. And then one was the Giants team that heated up at the end of the year with a really good defense. The other was Peyton Manning. Did it with a bad defense with the Colts. So you realize defense matters. Well, Tom Brady's had a top 10 scoring defense in 13 out of his 16 career years. That's insane. Aaron Rodgers has had it 2 times out of 10. One was his rookie year, or the first year he took the field rather, and the second time he won the Super Bowl. You give Aaron Rodgers a top 10 defense 13 out of 16 years, you're telling me he only has 1 Super Bowl? I mean, stop. And most Tom Brady truthers shy away from the stats because Aaron Rodgers blows Tom Brady out of the water there. Number 1 in quarterback rating. Tom Brady isn't even number 2. He's number 3. Touchdown interception ratio. Rodgers number 1 and it ain't even close. Tom Brady's closer to number 3 than he is to Aaron Rodgers. Oh, but Tom Brady's so good in the playoffs. No, Aaron Rodgers blows his playoff numbers out of the water. And you guys know I'm not a stats guy, but I'm just saying. You guys know I'm a film guy, and that's why I do prefer Aaron Rodgers to Tom Brady. He can do everything Tom Brady does inside the pocket, but when he's dealing with a great pass rush or the coverage is too good, Aaron Rodgers can simply do things, extending the play, getting outside of the pocket, making throws that Tom Brady wouldn't even think about. People say Tom Brady's much better in his system. He knows the offense better. He's more decisive. You could certainly argue that, but you do realize the Packers have literally crafted their entire offense around Rodgers' ability to throw back shoulders and get the ball downfield by extending plays. He's never been in a system that is predicated on getting rid of the ball quickly. And I'm not trying to call Tom Brady a system quarterback. Every quarterback, in a way, is a system quarterback. The only difference is Aaron Rodgers can plug into any system and Tom Brady can't. So I'm done venting about why Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback in the league, why I don't think it's crazy to call him the greatest of all time. Let's move on and talk about the rest of this roster now. And there's definitely holes on this roster, don't get me wrong. But I do think there is a lot of talent that's being overlooked here. So let's start with the running back here. It's going to be 3 guys that you're looking at here, and they're all a little different. So it's going to be Jamal Williams to start the season. I'm not a huge fan. I think he's a skilled running back without a lot of talent. Physically, he has looked good in the preseason. Not going to overreact to that. We'll have to wait and see what he can bring. And then you got Ty Montgomery, who I think you could argue is the most talented running back in this group. He just can't stay healthy. He already hurt his foot in the preseason. I mean, I don't think Green Bay is planning on giving him a high workload at all because he simply can't handle it. He's always getting hurt. And then Aaron Jones, who is suspended, who before the suspension I thought was going to capture this job, run away with it. I think he is clearly more physically talented than Jamal Williams, just has burst that Jamal doesn't have. I think he's a good receiver. So it really is going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. I think it's going to be kind of a Ferris wheel all season with these guys. But I will say this is more talent overall that this team has had at running back since the first couple years of Eddie Lacy's career. And then you move on to receiver, and it's pretty weird here because we're used to this team having a bunch of options, right? We think back to the James Jones, Jordy Nelson, Greg Jennings days. Even just 2 years ago, you had Jordy, Devontae, Cobb. Well, you got Devontae here, who I think is poised to be the best receiver Aaron Rodgers has ever played with. That's not a slight to Jordy. Jordy always had underrated speed as a deep threat and had that amazing back shoulder chemistry with Rodgers. But you talk about a guy who has simply more physical talent. I think Davante Adams has some of the quickest, most underrated feet and release at the line of scrimmage in the NFL. He is right there with, I think, Amari Cooper is excellent at this. And then obviously all the elite guys have really good release. But Jordy was never a guy that could get away from press like Davante Adams can. And Adams is just a better contested catch radius guy than Jordy ever was, I think. He's great after the catch as well. I want to say he was 3rd in the NFL in yards after catch, and that was with Brett Hundley when defenders were hogging the line of scrimmage. So I do think Davante Adams is going to have an incredible season. And I actually rank him as my number 1 fantasy receiver because Rodgers seems to throw 40 touchdowns every year, and I don't know who else it's going to go to. I could see Davante catching 15, 16, 17 touchdowns this year. So if you still got fantasy drafts, I've been targeting Davante Adams heavy. And notice I haven't mentioned Randall Cobb yet. You know, he's a name at this point. He's a slot receiver. He's getting older. He's in the last year of his contract. This team has no intentions of re-signing him, and I think Randall Cobb's a great slot receiver, a really, really great guy, but the guy just can't stay healthy. So at this point, he's just a guy. And then there's a huge drop-off after Cobb. I don't like Geronimo Allison. He's got good hands, but I don't know. I don't really see it in Geronimo Allison. And then they got all these rookies. I love Jamon Moore coming out, but he didn't really capture anything in the preseason. You got Equanimeous St. Brown, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I mean, Rodgers has never had a receiver as good of an athlete as any of these 3, but they're all seemingly pretty raw. Scantling has looked the best out of these 3. I think there's a chance that Scantling captures that job from Geronimo pretty quick. You got Trevor Davis, Jay Kumerow, D'Angelo Yancey, all these guys competing. We'll see how the cuts play out here in the next couple days. But man, this is going to be the Davante Adams show at receiver. And then you add Jimmy Graham to this group. Now, is he a vertical threat? No. Is he great after the catch? No. But his size alone and his mind and his hands That's why they paid him this money. He's going to be incredible in the red zone. If he doesn't score 10 touchdowns this year, then I don't know anything about football, because when Rodgers starts scrambling, Jimmy Graham is the guy he's going to look for. All he has to do is find that tight window, be on the same page with Jimmy Graham, which I think they will be, and put it where only Jimmy Graham can get it. In a split second, it's going to be a lethal combination in the red zone. And you can kind of say some of those same things about those two on third downs. So I do think it was a good signing. Even if he's not the same explosive guy that all the fans loved, they can still do some really nice things. And Jimmy Graham, in his Seattle days, became a blocker too, which people don't realize. He had much improved blocking grades by PFF for the last 2 seasons. And then I like the Mercedes Lewis signing as well. It doesn't really play into the receiving grade here, but a guy that can block and help out the run game. So they rank 16th at receiver, obviously boosted by Devontae Adams. Wouldn't be the least bit surprised if this team's kind of keeping an eye on cuts and maybe bringing in a more veteran guy here to get some playing time. It really depends what they think of the rookies. So then you move on, talk about the offensive line here, and this is where I go insane when people say the Packers have nobody outside of number 12. You got the best pass protecting left tackle in football playing on a really good contract. I think David Bakhtiari is one of the 15 best values in the NFL, especially on that contract. I've said in the last 2 videos that finding starting tackles in the modern NFL, I think has reached a point where it's harder than finding a starting quarterback. Probably easier to get an elite tackle than an elite quarterback, but these tackles just aren't coming out of college anymore, and the Packers have 2. Now, Brian Bulaga has always dealt with injury issues. He's healthy right now. If he can stay healthy, is one of the best tackle duos in the NFL. And like I said in the Steelers video, that's one of the most underrated assets any team could ever have. The interior gets a little iffy. The guards I'd be worried about. Lane Taylor's fine. Right guard is a huge question mark. It's set to be Justin McCray right now. I would not be stunned if things go poorly here at guard and this team brings Jari Evans back, who started at right guard last year. He's still a free agent. And then you got Corey Linsley, solid top 20 or so center there. So you got the center and the tackles, which usually if you have those 3 pieces, you can figure things out at guard, depending how big of a weakness those guards can be. So it's a solid line. They come in 12th. And as an offense, I have them number 2. Nobody is worried about how good this offense can be now that number 12 is back. But let's move on to the defensive side of the ball. And this might surprise some people. I've got them as the 13th defense in the NFL. Now, I'm not an idiot. There are huge holes on this defense, but there's some high-end talent on this roster that is going to help this team do some things. And I don't know if this team has top 10 defense potential, but I do think it has potential, especially, and I emphasize that, with a new defensive coordinator. This has been a disaster for many reasons. You got the injuries that people love to fall back on, sure. They have not helped. In the NFC Championship, I think this team started 2 undrafted rookie corners a year ago. You have the fact that this team doesn't bring in free agents. Also doesn't help. But the biggest problem here is that this team is a draft-first organization. And when you do that, that means you're playing a lot of young players. And when you have one of the most complex defensive schemes where your defensive coordinator's sitting up in the booth and not coaching these guys on the field, he's coaching an outdated scheme from the early 21st century. You got all these young kids flying around with all this potential that aren't developing because they're just confused and not getting coached up. And it's not like McCarthy's a defensive guy. So I think bringing in Mike Pettin, a former head coach, and a guy that everyone has already said is just reignited this defense, it's going to be that alone. Forget the personnel. It's a massive increase to this defense. But then you look at the personnel, and let's go through this. We'll start with the run defense, where this is the 3rd best run defense in the NFL. That's where they ranked last year. And then you add Muhammad Wilkerson to this group. This, I would argue, is the 2nd best interior defensive line in the NFL. I think you take the Rams, obviously, because of Donald. They got Sue now. But you want to talk about controlling the line of scrimmage, and we saw what that did for the Eagles last year. Mike Daniels, Kenny Clark, Muhammad Wilkerson, and then they got great depth too, because you got Dean Lowry, who's developed really well here, and then a 3rd-round pick in Montravis Adams from last year. It's going to be really hard to run the ball on this team this year. And you factor Blake Martinez, who I think is one of the most overrated players in the NFL because he's a complete liability to be on the field anytime the other team is considering throwing the football, and this is 2018. So I don't like Blake Martinez, but there's no denying he's one of the better run defending linebackers in the league. Definitely helps out there. So the run defense is going to be good, but it's a passing league. So can this team start to defend the pass better? Well, you look at the pass rush, you got Clay Matthews, you got Nick Perry. These guys have just been exchanging injuries for the last 2 seasons. Is that ever going to stop? I mean, probably not. I've got them ranked as the 19th pass rush. When healthy, this is, in theory, a really good duo. People think Clay Matthews is washed up. I thought he was pretty healthy last year. Actually, looked about 85% of what he always has been. He's not getting any younger, but he is playing for another contract this year. PFF rating was higher than it's been in a long time. And then Nick Perry feels like he's playing every other game with a club on his hand for some reason. He's getting paid a lot of money to get after the quarterback, something he hasn't done consistently enough. So you got upside in this pass rush, and then you got a bunch of rotational guys who have kind of showed some things. Reggie Gilbert had a huge preseason, had like 4 sacks in the preseason. And then Vince Beagle. Also got Kyler Fackrell, a 3rd-round pick from a couple years ago. I don't think there's a whole lot there. But in theory, it should be a better pass rush just if these guys can stay healthy. But we'll see. And then they add Oren Burks. Did suffer an injury in the preseason, but I believe he will be back. Maybe not to start the season, but this defense under Dom Capers and Ted Thompson literally refused to adapt to the modern NFL where you're playing fast, undersized linebackers. I mean, you don't have Blake Martinez's in the NFL anymore. The average height and weight of linebackers has fallen off a cliff, and they finally take a freak athlete, and I mean a freak, in Oren Burks. I think he could emerge as a huge impact on this defense just to get some speed in the second level of that defense that has just suffered against crossing routes and tight ends and all that stuff. But the linebacker grade is not very good. It's 29th. And then the defensive backs here, I mean, look, it's not the best. I've got them tied for 22nd, but this is the best secondary this team has had since Casey Hayward left. You bring in Tramon Williams, who was under the radar, a top 20 PFF corner last year, still looks very athletic in what he's shown in the preseason, and he's also a guy who can play some safety here because the safety depth stinks. He played safety at a pretty high level for Cleveland, and whether or not he does that is really going to hinge, I think, on Kevin King, because I think Jaire Alexander and Josh Jackson are plugged in as starters here, especially Josh Jackson. I had Josh Jackson actually ranked ahead of Jaire Alexander on my draft board. I had him as the 3rd corner in this draft, and a guy I would have taken in the top 15. And all he's done, granted in the preseason, is dominate. First 3 preseason games allows a quarterback rating of 0. Highest rated PFF cornerback in the preseason, and really one of the highest rated players in the preseason. Now, again, it's preseason, I get it, but there's clearly something there in Josh Jackson that this team has lacked, in a guy that's going to plug in as an athletic, big, smart playmaker in the secondary that this team has just straight up lacked. And then Jaire Alexander, their 1st-round pick at corner, and then Kevin King, a guy who showed some really nice things in the first 4 or 5 games of the season before, missing the rest of the season. He's a freak athlete, a guy many thought very highly coming out, but is still a little raw. So between those 4, that's talent at cornerback that this team just hasn't had. And then at safety, you got Clinton Dix, one of the best 12 to 15 safeties in the league, just very solid. I don't know if he's ever going to become an elite guy just because he's not the most explosive guy as far as his athleticism, but just a really sound safety, good in run defense as well. And then the other safety I would be worried about. You got Josh Jones, a 2nd-round pick, and Kentrell Bryce, who's an undrafted free agent. Jones, a freak athlete, but very much unproven. I think this team's best secondary includes Tramon Williams as the free safety, the 3 young kids at corner, and Clinton Dix as the other safety playing more in the box, which actually, if he was able to come into the box and use the best part of his game, which is his run defense, and not be that center fielder, where right now he's got to be that guy because the rest of the secondary is giving up huge chunk plays, and he's just out there to clean up the trash. Well, if you put Tramon Williams back there to do that, you might see an increase in play from Clinton Dix, moving into the box, doing what he does a little better. So that's it for the roster breakdown. Got a little long, but I had some things I had to defend on based on the comments lately. At coach and culture, I got this team 12th. You know, I think McCarthy, he's fine. He's a really good organizational guy. He's a rock. I think he's good at developing players and doing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that we don't talk about. But, you know, as a football mind, he's fine. You know, he's nowhere near like Kyle Shanahan in terms of offensive genius. And it is a young team, might be dragging the culture down a little bit, but traditionally has been a very good culture here in Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers obviously boosts that up as well. When you know you got number 12 out there, you might put in that extra rep in the weight room. You just have that extra incentive knowing you got a real chance. So let's wrap this up. Take a look at the schedule. And Green Bay lucked out this year. They do play the NFC West, which is a good division, but really any NFC division matchup is going to be tough. But in the AFC, you know, the AFC East just sucks. So they get 3 guaranteed wins. They luck out getting Buffalo in Lambeau as well, because if you got to go to Buffalo, it's a different story, but they get Buffalo at home. So you get 3 guaranteed wins. Miami, Buffalo at home, and your road game's the Jets. They start out the year with a pretty favorable schedule. Now, this team tends to start slow for whatever reason, so I did give them a loss at Washington. It could be that Minnesota game. You know, I think they split with Minnesota this year. Really going to be a fun stretch where, you know, starting there week 6, I think there's a bye week in there, but you got the 49ers at the Rams and at New England. Can't wait for that Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers game. We've only seen it once. The other time these two teams matched up, I believe it was Matt Flynn getting the start because of a concussion to Rodgers. But the second half of the schedule there, it's pretty easy, especially those last 3 games. I did give them a loss to Atlanta, a team that just has Green Bay's number. I don't think Green Bay matches up with them well at all because of the speed they have on defense and the way that they can really control Green Bay with their offense. So I've got this team actually going 12-4. I can see it being anywhere between 10 and 14. Vegas has this team's over-under at 10, which is, by the way, one of the highest in the NFL. So I'm not crazy for ranking them this high for everyone that keeps telling me I am. So looking forward to the comments on this one. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, whether you agree or not. It's going to help me out here on the channel. So cheers as always, guys, and we'll see you next time.